Gary Gilmore is not going to miss the chaos. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, apologies for a couple of days without. Just didn't do one on Tuesday. Monday was an issue as well. So we're back. We're set to go. A lot of offseason to talk about, and we'll start previewing the football season upcoming. We're going to talk about the Sunbelt regional losers, but everybody made a regional final that went, right? Cajuns, Southern Miss, JMU, and Coastal all represented well. I mean, Arizona even lost. They didn't win a game in their own regional. So everybody bounced back with at least a win, but Tennessee is tough. A&M is tough. We find out NC State is tough as well. But I did want to talk about what Gary Gilmore said, because I've seen it both ways. And from both from Twitter accounts in the Sun Belt. And so Gary Gilmore, the now former Coastal Carolina baseball coach, and we do love some Gary Gilmore, retiring at the end of the year, and so thrilled that he's going to be able to spend time with the grandkids and his family, and that he's relatively healthy. Thrilled for that. But boy, he just decided to go off at the postgame press conference when they lost to Clemson. And he said, think about if big league baseball or big league sports had free agency every year. And that's kind of what we have in college. And that's true. Right now, it seems to be that way. Players can hop, skip, and jump as much as they want. All right. Now, as far as Major League Baseball goes, or Major League Sports go, they don't want free agency every year. And it's not the teams necessarily, it's the players. And the reason that it won't work quite as much as you think in college is because if you flood the market, that's going to lower the costs. So if you have 3 or 4 good lefties, starting pitchers that are available, then you got to compete. Then the 30 teams got to compete for the 3 or 4. But if I got 50 or 100 or whatever it is every year, whatever the count may be, all of a sudden, well, maybe the couple of guys at the top get a lot of money, but then everybody else goes down. And remember, this is a work in progress. This is year number 4 of this. And almost the collectives are going to be obsolete in a year. Maybe not at G5s, but the colleges are going to be doing the paying, not the collectives. We got a collective. We're going to use the collective, and now we're not going to need the collective. That's how fluid this is. And I just keep in mind, it's the Bryce Young thing. How many years of Bryce Young? Bryce Young played 2 years of college football. Well, 3, but 2 years as a starting quarterback for Alabama, and now he's going to his second year. So that's how I know what year it is. So we're going to year 4 of this. And, it took baseball forever. Baseball was playing for how many years before they got to free agency? And remember back then, I mean, it's the same thing. Free agency was going to kill the sport. Free agency was going to decimate the sport. They said the same thing in football, and they said the same thing in basketball. Now, if you look at Major League Baseball, there only seem to be a handful of teams good in each league. That may be it's more profitable to finish second than to compete. That's a different thing. But the NFL has never been more popular, never been more successful. And, you have a very, owners are very capitalistic, except when it comes to the players. They have a salary cap, and we have to limit and figure out how to pay these players with a relatively soft cap. Right. And then you get these you got the Larry Bird rules in the NBA, where we can overpay one of our own players if we drafted them, things like that. So this is all a work in progress. It's happening in real time. The NCAA screwed it up in a big way, always trying to fight it instead of trying to figure out a solution. Someone somewhere had to say, you know what, guys, this isn't going to go well. Like when they first lost the Ed O'Bannon case, just let's say we take it to the end and we lose each time. Even if people said in the room, well, that's not going to happen. But what if it does? What if we decide, cut our losses here, and let's move forward to figure out a different method of having college sports? Right. But these schools keep on bringing in, a couple $100 million. Right. Even the lower ones in the Power Five are bringing in, 9 figures. And it's not just all the players that are the chaos. And I could go back and look, but I didn't. I don't think it's quite 10, but it's probably about a half a dozen. One retirement in January changed. It had to be for over 100 coaches. Nick Saban retired a couple of days after the national championship game, right? So about a week to 10 days after the semifinal game. And so he retires, and that sends everybody in a tailspin, right? Kane Womack ends up, I thought he would triple his salary, but he doubled his salary or something along those lines. He went from like $800,000 as the head coach of South Alabama to 1.6 or so as the defensive coordinator, or maybe co-defensive coordinator for Alabama. Okay. Now here's the problem with that timing. He had a bunch of players sign in December. So now these players going into their final semester in high school, having committed to South Alabama, now don't have their head coach. Now they kept it with Major Applewhite, so maybe he kept a bunch of people, but that's the chaos. And so, all these coaches changed because Kalen DeBoer changed, and he had to get a new coach in Washington, and then all those changes over on the West Coast. It was domino. That's chaos too. Why doesn't anybody say anything about that chaos? One job changed a bunch. One job opening. And so that happens on both sides. I think someone will figure this out eventually, whatever the case may be. And a lot of good suggestions have been put out there. But to think that the chaos is it's chaos now because we haven't figured out the proper way of doing it. All right. And so I didn't realize this. Rick Cleveland wrote about it yesterday. Mississippi Today. He wrote about Southern Miss losing their pitcher, Hurston Waldrop, to Florida. And so instead of Southern Miss getting to Omaha, Waldrop helps Florida into the College World Series. Right, 2 out of 3. Losing to LSU. So once we figure it out, and it'll be interesting to see how it turns out, but someone will figure it out. You're going to have to, I think there will be contracts and there could be employment, but it's all negotiated. So if it's negotiated, then everybody agrees to it and everyone will have contracts, because that's where the teams are going to suggest this, right? And eventually the players are going to come around, because again, if you have 300 wide receivers in the portal every year, that doesn't help them get paid. That money's going to run out fast. You're going to have 30 teams or so that are going to go get the guys, and the rest are not going to have any money. That's the way it's going to be. So I think there's chaos out there already, but we were told the same thing when Major League Baseball did it, when the NFL did it, when the NBA did it. I'm sure soccer had their issues over in Europe. So I think it'll all get worked out. I certainly understand where Gary Gilmore is coming from, but because it's playing out in real time, and it's not like these guys had a whole lot of time on their hands to begin with, now it is chaotic. So to use Gary Gilmore's word. All right, let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll recap the regional finals. Tough weekend for the Sun Belt, but I think they showed out. Maybe got to talk about, these well, there wasn't the Sun Belt teams that had that issue, but the teams that lost and had to play the Sun Belt early on Sunday, that's a tough spot. That's a tough spot. Let me tell you about Gametime. Gametime makes NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down closer to when it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. I told you the story. Bought Eastern Conference semifinal tickets, Knicks and Pacers. It was great. Surprised my nephew. He loved it, and we'll definitely be using the Gametime app when the opportunity comes up again. You do get these last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Those flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And you get that all in pricing. You can toggle the feature that shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And, of course, you get to see those views. You get the panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and it's the lowest price guarantee. Or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Did have a discussion on my other podcast, Schultzycast, about, what are the realistic expectations of these teams. Now, I happen to think that Southern Miss kind of blew it a year ago when, they won game 1 against Tennessee, had their ace on the mound. I think rain came in and it turned things around for the Volunteers, and we know the rest of the story. But just going into this, and I'm taking it from a Cajuns point of view, and even from a Southern Miss point of view, right? Like trying to beat A&M in College Station is hard. College, they're good, right? I don't know what the Southern Miss Tennessee stats were, but I know A&M, the top four hitters in their lineup had 85 home runs. The Cajuns as a team had 80. How do you beat that? The guy coming out of the bullpen, the kid coming out of the bullpen in A&M's third game is throwing 100. So not the guy who started against Grambling, of course, and not the guy or anybody who pitched against Texas late night, but the guy coming in after the lefty, kind of shut the Cajuns down. The right-hander, Cortez, is muscling up 100. It's tough. And, Power 5 teams just don't have that, and we don't see a lot of that. We see some of it during the year, but not a lot of it. All right, so let's go through it. All right, I'll start with the Cajuns. That's the one I covered. Cajuns lost to Texas, kind of got away from them. Carson Fluno was an interesting choice to start. I guess they were hoping that Chase Morgan would pitch well or pitch against A&M if they won that ball game. They did not. Did get away from the bullpen a little bit. Texas also has a bunch of really, really good players, and that Cajuns actually got out to a lead in that one, and maybe they took Carson Fluno out a little too soon, but it got away from them. They come back. They beat Grambling. DeBarge, another record, total bases in a single season, and he fell 3 RBIs short of setting the new team record as well, along to go with his home run record. But they come back. They beat Grambling. I don't think they walk through that, but they didn't hit some lesser pitching as they probably should have. Jeremiah Newman pitched really well, his longest outing of the year for Grambling. He's got a 20 ERA and a 4.22 batting average against, and relatively did shut the Cajuns down. Then they brought in a kid that throws 55, and I think Yuha's hit one off him, but he struck out DeBarge. So Cajuns beat Grambling, and then what I was trying to say at the end of the last segment, Texas and A&M played, and they actually played a longer game. Cajuns played about a 3.5-hour ball game. That almost went 4, but the Grambling pitching got better. This ball game went 10 innings. A&M wins, but it went 3 hours and 50 minutes. And Texas had even from the end of the game, they're playing 14 hours later. Well, their pitcher, Ace Whitehead, following the game on Sunday said, I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't get to bed till 3 or 4. And they were taking batting practice at 10. I know they're kids. I know it's part of it. But I mean, that's a tough turnaround, right? You're physically exhausted. You're mentally exhausted. That's a brutal way to turn it around. I'm pretty sure A&M gets to choose what time they want to play, but then TV is going to dictate. And of course, they're going to put A&M and Texas in prime time because why wouldn't you do that, right? It was a great atmosphere, but that's a tough turnaround for Texas. Nonetheless, also didn't see the way the game was going to turn out. I figured you got to leave Morgan in there, even if he gives up, 2, 3, 4, 5 runs, because the game's going to be 9-8. Well, it was 2-1 into the 8th. Cajuns were leading 2-1. Morgan had given up 1 run. I think Ace Whitehead had given up 2 runs. It was a close game until, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but they played center field. The PA announcer played center field, or the music people at A&M. And then the Cajuns exploded for 7 runs in the 8th and go on to win that game 10-2. They come back, and then they're trying to mix and match against A&M, and A&M hit 5 home runs. They pitched to Brandon Montgomery a couple of times, which they probably shouldn't have done. Deggs thought that, when Cortez come in and is throwing 100 miles an hour, that, pitches were a little bit wide. I don't think that's why A&M beat them, but I think the Cajuns had a fabulous season. Maybe they could have gotten an easier draw if they don't go 2-out in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, but not much. I think their pitching got a little bit pooped. All right. I think Langevin was tired by the end of the year. Morgan looked pretty good. We got to see if he's going to come back. Hopefully he's coming back for the Cajuns' sake. Herman could come back. He pitched pretty well against Grambling, gave up a couple of home runs, but Grambling can hit. So it was good to see him out there again. But I think the Cajuns, they had coach of the year, player of the year, pitcher of the year, freshman of the year. It was a fabulous season for the Cajuns, winners of 16 in a row and 21 out of 22 regular season champs. That's a good season. Okay. Southern Miss, new coach, replacing an ace, and they got all kinds of injuries, and they just started coming up and up and up and up and up, and all of a sudden they finished second. Kind of like, where did that come from, right? And if they didn't pitch to DeBarge, they may have finished first, but they thought they knew better. They could have got swept in that series. They could have won 2 out of 3, but they also could have been swept. Nonetheless, they end up taking the Sun Belt Conference tournament, and for their troubles and their success, they get the number 1 seed in the country, Tennessee. Man, I mean, that's a screw job. That is, it's interesting. I think the NCAA, committee goes by FPI and RPI when they want to, and then not when they don't. That's crazy because Southern Miss came in the highest rated Sun Belt team, into the conference tournament. Then they won the conference tournament. Don't think they lost a game in the conference tournament, and they're the worst number 2 seed in the nation. Come on. I know. Not fair to Southern Miss at all. But they end up actually losing to Indiana. They lost to Indiana. They come back and beat Northern Kentucky. And I'm going to get a Norse cap. I got to get a Norse cap. I want a Norse cap. And then they did the same thing to Indiana. They played Indiana early after Indiana lost to Tennessee. And Southern Miss got the rest. Indiana didn't. Southern Miss rips them 15-3. Now, Tennessee takes care of Southern Miss in the final game, 12-3. I think that was, I saw when it was close. Let's see how close it really wasn't. When did Tennessee break that game open? So it was actually 3-2 heading into the 6th, and then 4 in the 6th, 3 in the 7th, 3 in the 9th. And again, Middleton pitched well, but the bullpen struggled against Tennessee as you would think. But it seems like Southern Miss, as per the case, had another fantastic season. I hope they enjoyed their Applebee's. Congrats to the new coach and to Golden Eagles fans. It was a nice last couple of months of the season for them. All right, let's take a time out. We'll get to JMU and Coastal, also losing in the regional round, regional final. We'll do that after I thank you. All right, almost 1,250 subscribers. We will do our best of previewing college football. David Hale from ESPN rated all the quarterbacks. We'll get to that this week. We're still going to try and get the coaches in. They're thinking maybe doing camps nowadays, but maybe I can squeeze them in. Still want to get a couple, mostly Charles Huff, Del McGee, and my guy Major Eploy. So see if we can get those guys going as we look towards college football. Basketball is still going with Lucas Taylor from Georgia State transfers to my Orange. What is going on here? Worlds colliding. Lucas Taylor going from Georgia State to Syracuse. So still lots to talk about. We'll have it all here for you. Please tell your friends and family. Share it when you see it on social media. Please get others to subscribe. Again, the goal is 1,500 by August 31st. I think we can do it. We only need 250. June, July. It's 3 months. We can do it. Come on. We can do it. Really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. Back to the show. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, let's see what, and again, I do apologize. Tried to keep up with it as much as I could, but was in College Station with the Cajuns. So it does seem like most of these teams, maybe Coastal was different. JMU also, they had a backward season, right? They got this great RPI, and I think that had to do with 4 games against Arkansas, beating Arkansas once. And so they had this magnificent RPI, but they kept on falling. And then they had a great, right? They played to the semifinals in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, and I thought they got in, and they did. And so they go to the Raleigh Regional, and I thought they had a shot at beating them. I really did. All right. They did lose to South Carolina 8-7. They did come back and beat Bryant 8-1, and then they shut out South Carolina 2-0. Should be noted, or maybe it doesn't have to be noted, but will be noted. Mark Kingston, the South Carolina head coach, has been let go. And then they lose 5-3 to NC State in the regional final. See what we got here. So this game was 3-2, 4-3. So NC State couldn't put up a goose egg every time they scored. They got one more in the fourth than James Madison did. So NC State scored 2, James Madison 1. NC State scored 1 in the 6th, James Madison scored 1. So it's 3-2. NC State gets an insurance run in the 8th, but JMU comes back with 1. So it's 4-3. And JMU is the home team. Of course, it's a ridiculous rule, but it is what it is. And NC State gets that one more run in the 9th for a 2-run cushion. It should be noted, my goodness, NC State had base runners galore. JMU walked 10 batters, gave up 10 base hits. NC State left 16 men on base. So those were stressful pitches that JMU is throwing, but that extra takes the wind out of your sails. You get it to be a 1-run game, easy to get 1 run across in the 9th, and we saw other teams do it a whole lot more than just 1 in the tournament over the weekend. But NC State, with a run in the 9th, ends up winning it 5-3. Did tweet out, someone thanked him for covering. I think it was Duke's Recruits for. He thanked everybody for following him on Twitter. And I mean, as years go, that's a pretty good one for JMU, right? Hosting game day. Forget about the can't win the conference BS and the, can't go to, can't play for the conference championship. Forget about that. They hosted game day. They won the conference tournament in basketball and won an NCAA basketball game. And they went to the NCAA baseball tournament. No pressure, Bob Chesney. No pressure. That's going to be tough to top. All right. That's going to be a tough one to top. So it was a heck of a year for JMU. Coastal did a lot like JMU. They were really good, and everybody that I spoke to thought that they were going to be the team that challenged the Cajuns as the season went on, but they struggled. Gary Gilmore didn't think, and he may be honest to a fault, he didn't think they were getting in, after they went 1-2 in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, and maybe they wouldn't have, even with being well connected on the committee, if they had lost to Georgia State in the play-in, if you will. But they beat Georgia State, then they lost a couple of ball games, and then they made it count. They beat Vanderbilt, right? I mean, that's got to be an awesome feeling. And they didn't just beat Vanderbilt; they hammered Vanderbilt 13-3, and then they had their chance against Clemson. They lose 4-3 against Clemson, and they missed that opportunity. They, in fact, were tied with Clemson heading into the ninth, and they could not. Fluky could not hold it, although he ended up striking out the side. Weicker gave up 2 unearned runs. That's a killer. Antonacci's been so good, and Beach so good, but they had some errors, and that's a tough loss for Coastal Carolina because they very well. That seemed to be the closest to go 2-0. James Madison came close to beating NC State, but they would have had to beat him again. So that's, that would have been tough. Coastal does beat High Point, but then, as has been the case with most of the Sun Belt teams, they ran out of pitching, and Clemson's pretty good. Clemson beats Coastal Carolina 12-5. We do congratulate Gary Gilmore on a sensational career. No one around sports or college baseball, and certainly not the Group of Five, is ever going to forget Coastal Carolina winning the College World Series in 2016. I got to see that up close and personal before they were in the Sun Belt. They came to Baton Rouge. It was phenomenal. A couple of guys had rubber arms, and you had these guys that could, bunt and hit and run and hit with power. And they befuddled what was a very, very good LSU team. And then they went out and took care of it against Arizona. So congratulations to Gary Gilmore. Really appreciate all his time that he's come on the show. He's come on a couple of times. I love talking. Just forget about, again, the NIL and the portal stuff. I would just love to talk baseball with Gary Gilmore. I would love just to grab a beverage and we could talk about when you're hitting and running, when you're not. Why do you not walk this guy? Why are we pitching to Charlie Condon? Not him personally, but, they're giving up home runs to Charlie Condon, although there's an open base. I would love to have a chat with him. He would be great to sit down and talk baseball with. I loved when I got a chance to do that with Roadshow. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do apologize for the lack of episodes earlier this week. We will have at least 2 more this week. Only supposed to put out 3 per week now, but we'll see if we can do more. If I can come up with topics, I'm happy to do that. We can, do the basketball portal, and mostly it's the football portal. Again, David Hale from ESPN leveled, if you will, all of the quarterbacks across the nation. And we will tell you what those levels are. And we'll talk about that later this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Dave Schultz, and you've been watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day.